Blog Talk Radio.
Michiamo Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit Neye AMANSEM da Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi mu Odwirafo Odwiraman mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, Black people. Today is AMANSEM Day, Affairs of the Nation Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan. Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say thank you to the broadcast once again. We're opening up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room, you need to log in as a user in order to interact. If you do not have a username, quickly in Blog Talk, so that you can interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised and we can interface with you there on the phone line. For those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akhan for Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion on Joda on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion. First and foremost, because we are Akhan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akhan ancestral religion, cosmology, culture, and so forth, from the Western Hemisphere, but also from individuals on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit who have been infected with white culture and therefore has been infected as well. So we show our ancient ancestral descent from ancient Khanat, which is a title of ancient Nubia. We migrated from ancient Khanat as Akan people, the Akan land or Khanat land, Khanit land. We migrated west, reestablished the Khanat or Khanit Empire, the Ghana Empire in the western part of the continent a couple of thousand years ago. A few hundred years later, we migrated further south towards the forest belt. And hundreds of years after that, some of our people were forced from those regions to North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo-Kessie, the enslavement era. So this is how Akan people from ancient Khanat ended up in West Afuraitkaitnit and further west, the extreme west in the Western Hemisphere. But we maintained our ancestral religious traditions. So as we've proven and shown in our publications, broadcasts, and conferences, Khenty is the Akan ancestral religion in Suriname and South America. Obia is the Akan ancestral religion in Jamaica. Hoodoo is the Akan ancestral religion in North America. So, and on the basis of that ancestral religious practice of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in general, we maintain our ancestral religious practices, maintain our focus, our culture, our drive, and we were there united by the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, the deities, and spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circles to wage war against the whites and their offspring, force them into submission, force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere, because we consistently wage war against the whites and their offspring, powered by our ancestral religious practices. Chemical and biological warfare, as well as physical metal armaments and so forth. So this is what we deal with on Monday nights, Joda, on Akampo Nanasom. On Nada Tuesday nights, we have Ojira, where we deal with ancestral religion in general, not just the Akhan expression, but expressions of our ancestral religious practices wherever we have migrated or were forced to migrate in the world. We show how it impacts every aspect of our lives. Ancestral religion, we call Nanasom, is operationalized through Ojira, or purification. So we say Ojira purifies Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our ancestral religious practices. Ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine law. It means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions and actions with divine order, and through ritual we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to realign our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. Ojida, purification, nanason. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance to every thought, intention, and action. And that is our culture, to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day, to execute our function in creation and harmony with order without creating disorder in the process, embracing ourselves and eradicating our enemies. The divine acceptance of the law or love of order, the divine rejection or divine hate of disorder and its purveyors. That is our culture. When we make mistakes, we engage the ritual process through ancestral religion to realign ourselves with divine order through incorporating law and restoring balance. So as we seek to engage that process every moment of every day, we show how ancestral religion therefore impacts every aspect of our lives. It's Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people. So that's what we deal with on Ojirada Tuesdays, Akwada Wednesday nights. We have Egua Marketplace, where we showcase Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving the community in a positive capacity, those who have maintained their ancestral religious values in the context of their service, showcase individuals, organizations, and institutions. They sit with us on the show to talk about their business and take questions from the audience and so forth. We also talk about the philosophical foundation for an economic model, which is in our ancestral religious values. We've published the Akhan economic development model, which is an approach to economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. Part of the process and strategy within that model is what we call starve the beast and feed the pride. So that means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites in our offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate those funds away from the white businesses and redirect them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks for capital fusion. When you starve the beast and feed the pride and reallocate $10 away from a white business and redirect it to the business of the week, that's a transfer of $10 from the white community to our community. When 1,000 of our people engage that process, then that's a transfer of $10,000 from white businesses directly to a black business. And that business is able to immediately hire within the community, hire full-time within the community, maintain that employment for those individuals within the community, expand their products and services to us, and serve us now. So it's always a win-win situation. If we do not engage that process by default, we leave the $10,000 in the hands of the whites in our offspring. By default, we finance our own oppression. So we must engage that process of starving the beast and feeding the pride. So that's what we deal with on Egua Marketplace Day. On Yauda, which is Thursdays, also called Yada and Abada and Akan, we have AMANSEM, Affairs of the Nation. Amanne means nation. Amanse, Asem means affairs or issues of the nation. Things that are confronting us, we need to approach from a nationist perspective. We talk about Amanne, nationism, the purification of nationalism. We deal with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Black nationism. When we talk about nationism or Amanne, we're talking about the nation in the real sense, not in a Eurocentric sense, not in a Eurocentric sense in blackface with a pseudo-Afrocentric definition of what nation building is. We're talking about the real sense a nation, and Amanne is an entity, a living, breathing entity, governed by abosom, governed by divinities. We are cells within a larger organ. An organ is an entity, function. It operates according to its function in alignment with the greater body of which is a component part, and the cells are children of the organ. They have their own function, they have their own structure, but the structure is in alignment with the organ of which they are component parts, that they are children of. When we naturally coalesce together, drawn together by our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors in a specific region of the Earth Mother, and we naturally coalesce and we blend ancestral blood circles in a specific region of the Earth Mother. We interface with her in the region that we find ourselves on. But then when we interface with her and we listen to our Nsamanfo, we're drawn together organically. We blend ancestral circles to bring specific ancestresses and ancestors of specific clans back through these blended blood circles. And we interface with Asase Afua, the fertile Earth Mother, in a specific region of her body. That unique interfacing with her, as well as the interfacing with the manifestation of the abosom, the forces in nature in that region of the Earth Mother, as well as our ancestral blood circles that we have blended in that region of the Earth Mother. Those things in connection forge a locative identity. We have Akwamu self-knowledge rooted in our locative identity. We are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African black people, because we are children of Ra and Ra'et. Afura, Afurayat are titles of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. Ka and Ka'et are the male and female terms for the soul, divine consciousness, the deity that dwells in the head region of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, black people only. Ka and Ka'et are also the male and female terms for highland, exalted land, and so forth. So Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit is the land, Ka, Ka'et of Afura, Afurayat, the creator and creatress. But Ka and Ka'et also means soul. Ra, divine creator, creatress. They are the great spirit within creation, the divine living energy in creation. Instead of saying divine living energy, the terms are Ba and Ba'et, the divine living energy of creation. We have a portion of the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et within our being. That portion of their divine living energy, or that portion of their Ba, we have a miniature Ba, or divine living energy force within us that was taken from the great Ba, which is Ra, or Afura, and taken from the great Ba, the great spirit, female spirit, Ra'et, or Afuraet. We have if you're a male, you have a Ba, a divine portion of a divine living energy within you, animating. If you're a female, you have a Ba'et, a portion of that divine living energy animating you, and you can direct that force within you. So we have energy from Ra and Ra'et. Our soul, our divine consciousness is rolling in our head region, our Ka. If you're male, Ka'et. If you're female, that's of course. So we are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. We have the soul, Ka. We have the portion of the Ra and Ra'et. The Ba means flesh. Ra is the divine living energy. Ka means soul, as well as the high land. Afu means flesh. Ra'et is the divine living spirit energy. And Ka'et, soul, divine consciousness, as well as the high land. So Afu, Ra, Ka is that flesh, spirit, and soul. We have that. We are thus Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. But what kind of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people are we? When we move to a different region of the Earth Mother, eat the foods, interface with her, plant life, animal life, mineral life, we procure that transforms our bodies. We become possessed by the deities in this region and their unique manifestation that transforms our cells, our bodies. When we have children, their bodies are made from that transformed DNA, and therefore they're the firstborn who are indigenous to the land. So we have a locative identity, and we must approach all of our issues rooted in our locative identity. We have a nationist approach. We are cells within a greater organ, governed by the abosom, the forces in nature that govern this region that we find ourselves on, not the polity called America. but this region of the Earth Mother. And when we have united in this region naturally because we listen to our Nsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors, and blended specific blood circles, then we have forged that locative identity. So the way we approach life and deal with issues of the nation or the AMANSEM is rooted in a nationist approach. There's no such thing in reality as a secular nationalism that's Eurocentric, or a secular Pan-African nationalism, or a secular Black nationalism. So that's what we're going to deal with. These are the kinds of issues we deal with and how we approach things from a nationist perspective. And tonight, the title, Heru the Blind, Khenty, Arty, Heru the Blind, healing the blind spot of nationalism through nationism. So this is what we're going to get into. Rooted in our publication, Odwiraman, AFAHYE, the Purified Nation, Odwiraman. As we said, Odwiraman means purified, Amanne means nation. Our designation for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere is Odwiraman, the purified Odwiraman nation. But mine, M-A-N, mine also means land of the setting sun, the West. So Odwiraman means the purified nation of in the land of the setting sun, the West. We are in the extreme west of Afuraitkaitnit, so we are Odwiraman, the purified nation in the Western Hemisphere. We had our conference, our first annual Odwiraman conference in June. The next one is coming up in June, of course, second annual Purified Nation Conference. We dealt with issues of Amanne Nationism, the purification of nationalism, a number of different presentations, dealing with educational institutions rooted in our culture, an approach to development and behavioral development rooted in our culture, the various 7 we touch on at the Odwiraman conference. This will be a yearly conference, of course. And of course, we have our other conferences as well, which we're going to talk about. But our book, Odwiraman AFAHYE, goes into detail about this notion of what nationism or Amanne is. Now, why do we call this Heru the Blind, healing the blind spot of nationalism through nationism? There are different expressions of the Abosom, the divinity, Heru, in our ancestral religious culture. And he's the same divinity. He's Yao in Akan, he's Shan in tradition, he's So or Hevioso in Vodun and so forth. This force in nature that operates through the core of the sun, the core of the earth, the core of the various planets, the heart of the sun or the heart of the earth and the heart of the different planets and so forth. He takes up residence in the heart region of the body, regulating the flow of divine energy throughout the body. King sitting in the heart region in the lower realm. Below the neck is the lower or the earthly realm. Above the neck is the quote-unquote heavenly realm. So the king in the heavenly realm and the queen mother in the heavenly realm, regulating order, is Alsar and Alset. They have that responsibility to regulate affairs in the spirit realm. Heru, as well as Herit, a form of Heru and so forth, regulating order on earth, quote unquote, the patron divinities of kings and queen mothers and these different things. So in the heart region, you have Heru regulating the flow of order, the flow of divine energy, and thus the flow of order. Just like your heart pumps and regulates the flow of blood throughout the body, throughout the circulatory system, and the blood carries the oxygen, and the oxygen carries the life force energy. The life force energy of Ra and Ra circulates living, created entities, naturally created entities. Once it gets into your body, the flow of that energy must be regulated according to the needs of your organs and cells and so forth. The heart regulates the flow of blood and thus regulates the flow of energy. Just like the king or queen mother sitting in the midst of the nation, holding together the nation, regulating the flow of energy, having the capacity to sum up all the energy within the nation. The king is the representative of the peoples, the ancestresses and ancestors. The queen mother is the representative of the ancestresses and ancestors to the people. So we have that interplay between the two. Heru is sitting in the heart, regulating flow of order, but energy and therefore order and so forth, relentlessly challenging disorder administering the affairs or administering the affairs of the nation and so forth, giving those directives, action, all the different things that a king, a sovereign does. Heru is sitting in the midst of the heart, just like he's sitting in the midst of the core of Earth and the core of the sun and the core of the different planets, regulating the flow of energy from the core to the surface. And that deals with thermodynamics and the stability of Earth, stability of the temperature and everything else. Now, there's a form of Heru called Heru Khenty an Arty, also Heru Khenty Arty. So Arty means I. Arty means the two or the dual or double I. So the two eyes are the two Arty. Arty. T just means dual in ancient Kemet or double. Khenty or Khenty or Khenty means first or foremost, front, leader, one who's in charge and so forth, but first, foremost, the foremost one, Khenty or Khenty, but Khenty, foremost one of the two eyes. That's Khenty Arty, but then you also have Khenty an Arty, the foremost one who does not have an, which is like an or non, like in non in English, when you see the height of the two hands turned down saying non or an, it's saying no, it's negative. Khenty an Arty, the foremost one without his eyes. The two eyes of Heru are the sun and the moon, and you'll see his face in the sky. And the term for head or hedi is the head itself. And you see the big head with the two ears sticking out in the heavens and so forth. That's the head of the deity, Heru. And from the female side, it would be Herit, the female divinity. And the two eyes of Heru are the sun and the moon. When Ra was ruling Earth, the sun and the moon were the two eyes of Ra. When Ra moved into the spirit realm and allowed Heru to take up residence as the king, ultimately, then he gives those two eyes to Heru. And they bring illumination, power, energy, and illumination during the daytime, of course, and even at nighttime with the full moon or the crescent moon and so forth. The two eyes, the right eye of the sun is the sun, right eye of Heru is the sun, the Aten, the left eye of Heru is the Jo, which is the moon. Those are his two eyes. He's the foremost one of the two eyes. He allows you to see what's in during the daytime and navigate your way through life. But then when the sun sets and one of those eyes are gone, then he allows you to see in the darkness and navigate your way through the darkness. So when you have a full moon out, then even though it's dark, darkness is natural, but blindness is a perversion. But even when the sun sets, you're not blind, there's just darkness, which is natural. So you have the full moon, you have some stars, you can utilize that starlight and moonlight to guide your way and navigate your way throughout the region without creating disorder and injury in the process. If you are in darkness and you need to see, then you invoke the divinity who has the capacity to shine light in the darkness so that you can see and find your way and navigate your way out of the darkness, out of spiritual darkness, out of social darkness, political, economic, and so forth. So you have Heru Khenty Arty, that's in his natural state, regulating the two eyes. Now, during the story of Heru and Set, when Set was trying to challenge Heru for sovereignty, the next king, after Alsar was killed and reestablished himself as ruler in the spirit realm, along with Set. Set is trying to rule, and when you look at the battle between Heru and Set, there's a portion when Heru attacks Set and they're fighting. Heru injures Set and he castrates Set, but at the same time, Set attacks Heru, and they say Heru, his two eyes were gouged out by Set. And first, there was one eye, and then the second eye being gouged out by Set. but then his eyes were healed. So if you look in the quote-unquote Runu Pert Im Heru, and you look in the specific text, they talk about when Heru's eye was gouged out by Set, but then Tahuti came and used his hands to heal Heru's eye. That particular eye that they're talking about in that particular text is the eye, the left eye of Heru, which is the moon. When you talk about Set gouging out the eye, not just plucking the eye out, but gouging the eye out, and you look at the quote-unquote amulet or the eye of Heru, and it's used as fractions in ancient Kemet, it represents fractions. When you look at the moon, when it goes from full moon to a three-quarter moon, to a half moon, to a moon, and then to a totally dark black new moon, it appears that the light is being gouged out bit by bit, day after day after day after day. The darkness is gouging out the light. And at that point, when it gets to a new moon, not only has the sun set, so one eye is gone, but then the other eye has been quote-unquote gouged out, so both eyes are gone. So you have Khenty and Arty, Heru the Blind, and so forth. Now that's a natural process because then the light begins to expand once again and we can navigate our way through the darkness. But if you're going through a process yourself where some of your light has been gouged out, you find yourself in spiritual darkness, we follow what happens with regard to the cosmology to see what takes place. When the light is gouged out, meaning the eye is gouged out, how does Heru, who has become Khenty and Arty, one without eyes, how does he navigate that way? He goes to Tahuti. They say Tahuti comes along because he's losing the battle now. He's losing. He can't see. He's losing the battle. Set is taking control. But then Tahuti comes along. He's directed to come along by Ra and heal the eye of Heru and restore that eye. And then that eye of Heru becomes a powerful talisman, and that's why we utilize these talismans, the eye of Heru. You would see those sculptures and necklaces and pendants and tattoos and everything else in ancient Kemet. That eye became a powerful talisman. That eye was then used to correct or revivify Asar. He was given that eye to be revivified. But first, Tahuti comes along to restore the eye of Heru. And once that eye is restored, then Heru is able to see. Eventually, Heru is adjudged to be the rightful heir to Asar to rule on earth, and Set is banished from ruling on earth. And he's taken into the boat of Ra, and he becomes the spokesperson of Ra. Set operates through the planet Set, or Awuku, so-called Mercury, taking up residence in the prow of the boat of Ra, where the sun disk is. That's simply the planet Mercury being placed right next to the sun. And of course, he becomes the spokesperson or messenger of the sun, because the messenger planet is the one that moves around the sun the fastest, and it broadcasts or projects the energy of the sun out as it's moving around the sun and wielding or whipping that energy around and broadcasting the energy of the sun in that fashion. So that's what's happening in the story, and you'll read that portion in the contendings of Heru and Set, misnomer the Chester Papyrus and so forth, where they talk about the aspect of the story. But it goes to the divinity of divine wisdom. The male divinity of divine wisdom is Tahuti. The female divinity of divine wisdom is Shat. Tahuti is also called Sesh, because Sesh means scribe, and the female scribe is Seshat. So Sesh and Seshat, or Tahuti and Sefek Abui, which is our other title, the male and female forces of divine wisdom. So when Heru gets his eye gouged out, he loses his light. So he's in the darkness, but the moon eye, the left eye, gets gouged out. So now he can't even see in the darkness, and he's losing the fight. But then the divinity of divine wisdom to begin to restore that eye. Tahuti wears the moon on his crown. He operates through the left eye of Ra, the reflection of Ra. Ra operates through the sun. He utilizes the sun to transmit his divine living energy. So does Ra'et. and other stars as well. They created the sun. They are not the sun divinities, but they operate through the sun, possess the sun and other stars to transmit divine living energy. And when you're in darkness, even though the sun is not apparent, but it's the reflection of the sun's light from the moon that illuminates the earth. So Tahuti, who is a spokesperson of Ra, the mouthpiece of Ra and Ra'at, and in the Book of the Cow of Heaven, when Ra says he's moving into the Sekhet Hetep first to develop the Sekhet Hetep, the ancestral realm, and moving to the spirit realm instead of ruling directly on earth, he says he's going to move further into the spirit realm. He places Tahuti in charge initially and gives him the power to regulate order on earth. He becomes a representative of Ra on earth and so forth. He gives him the moon and so forth to reflect the divine light and so forth. You see that in the Book of the Cow of Heaven, the so-called destruction of mankind. Eventually, Asar becomes king, and then Asar is killed by Set. Set is ruling for a minute. Then, of course, the whole story about Heru being born of Aset. He grows up into, manhood, and it's time for him to take back the throne and so forth. They're having their fight, their contention. Gouges out the eye, but then the divine force of wisdom, who was given the moon by Ra, he can restore some of that moonlight to the eye of Heru, his sight on a certain level. So Heru's eye begins to be restored. He begins to see where mistakes are being made so that he can overcome his adversary, so he can move forward, restore order, restore his place on the throne, and begin to regulate order and administer the affairs of the Amanne harmoniously, fully, with full vision, with full sight, and so forth. So that's part of the process. When we are in darkness, we're talking about an invocation of the divinity of divine wisdom, oracular divination, to find out what's going on while we're in this spiritual darkness. How are we to invoke the energy of Ra and Ra'at so we can bring some of that divine light or illumination, wisdom to us, so we can make decisions and restore order to our existence. That's part of that process. Another aspect, the other aspect of the story, is when Set gouged out Heru's eye. He had attacked him when he was on a mountain, and Heru fell down on the mountain and his eyes had been gouged out. So what took place after that, and this, you'll find this in the contendings of Heru and Set, that particular papyrus, Het Heru, the female force of creativity, reproductivity, and so forth, art, music, all of those different things. She finds Heru on the mountain, on the ground, on the mountain. She finds that his eyes have been gouged out. So she starts the healing process. And the way she starts the healing process is, they say she goes to a gazelle, which is an animal totem, and she gets some milk from the gazelle, and then she takes the milk and puts it in Heru's eyes, smears it in his eyes, drops it in his eyes, and so forth. And then she tells him to open up his eyes, and then he opens up his eyes, and his two eyes have been healed. So he starts the healing process. And then in the other text, of course, they talk about Tahuti, the force of divine wisdom, giving him the light or the illumination from those eyes so that he can see and operate and function in a harmonious fashion. For those who are involved in the Yoruba tradition, that connection between Tahuti, the male force of divine wisdom, dealing with oracular divination, who's Orunmila in the Yoruba tradition. And then they talk about how Orunmila taught Oshun, which is Het Heru, Erin de Lagoon, and so forth. That connection between Tahuti and Oshun, Orunmila and Oshun, be the same connection between Tahuti and Het Heru in these different aspects of the story of how Heru is getting his eyesight back, his inner vision back, his capacity to see what's in harmony with order, what's out of harmony with order, and to move forward. So the first thing that happens is when she finds him laying on the ground, she wants to heal those physical eyes. Goes to that animal totem, gets the milk, gets the medicine, and so forth, places the medicine in the eyes, restores the eye. Then Tahuti gets the light from Ra and Ra'at. That illumination from Ra and Ra'at takes that light or illumination, fuses it back into the healed eyes of Heru and so forth, so that he can begin to see, so that he can operate in harmony with divine order and find out the best means by which to overcome his adversary, but then also the best means by which to be a ruler, to administer the affairs of the nation in harmony with divine order without creating disorder in the process. So you invoke the divinity, Tahuti, in order to restore your sight so you can function harmoniously. Some of our people have a blind spot. When you have a blind spot when you're driving, there's nothing wrong with the car. The car has power. There's nothing wrong with your desire to move forward and get to your destination. You have that desire to get to your destination. You're in a vehicle that has the power to move you in that direction and so forth. But if you have a blind spot, you make decisions rooted in the fact that you have a blind spot that you're not even aware of, then you crash the vehicle and you don't make it. Not only do you not make it to your destination, but you create disorder in the process, and you have setbacks in the process. You don't understand why. You think you say, well, I had the power, I had the vehicle of the vessel to get me where I needed to go, but we're not making it to where we need to go. We keep crashing. We keep having problems. That's what a blind spot is. So we need to heal ourselves of these blind spots that we have, whether it's in life, whether it's spiritually, whether it's family, culture, politics, economics, and so forth. But there's a cosmological foundation or approach to, number one, identifying the fact that you have a blind spot. What we have been doing, our people who have been focused on certain issues with regard to nation building and so forth, since enslavement, at the end of enslavement, we've been trying different approaches and avenues to get to a certain result. We've had a blind spot. Now, there are two separate approaches. You have the approach, which are really two sides of the same coin. You have the integrationists and the quote-unquote nationalists. You have the integrationists who sought to integrate with the whites and their offspring. They were looking for integration, even though some will say they weren't trying to integrate. They were really trying to desegregate, but in reality, they wanted to live amongst the whites and their offspring. They just wanted equality and wanted to live amongst the whites and their offspring without being molested by them economically, politically, and so forth, and militarily. Then we had other people who said, no, we want to have our own separate, independent nation. Nationalists want to separate from the whites and their offspring and build something for ourselves. Two sides of the same coin. Number one, has led to our liberation as of yet. It's been over 150 years and so forth. Nobody's free based on the integrationist program. That's never going to lead to any kind of freedom at all. That's enslavement. But even the secular nationalist program or nationalist programs rooted in Christianity or rooted in Islam or rooted in some nonsensical Moorishism, nonsense like that, or just a secular nationalism or a pan-African nationalism or an amorphous nationalism without any grounding in culture, that has never led us to the goal or the goals that are being espoused by the philosophy. It's been over 100 years, and we are no closer to independence on our own sovereign territory, secure in our sovereignty. We're no closer to that today than we were 100 years ago. And even though we're no closer to that physically, of course, but no closer to that even mentally. The average Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person in the Western Hemisphere is not even thinking about independence. The idea of separating from the whites and their offspring and establishing something out of bounds is not even part of their thought process. But even those who are focused on that And we say this is the reason there's two sides of the same coin, because they were seeking separation physically from the whites in their offspring to escape from police terror and things like that. They were not seeking to break from the mindset. They thought they could bring Christianity into the new, if they went to the continent and established an independent nation, or went to Liberia or some other place and established an independent nation, this notion of, well, as long as we focus on the fact that we're black and we have, it doesn't matter what your religion is or what your culture is, as long as you focus on the fact that you're black and we need to come together, that blind spot, even if they had attained the land, it would have degenerated rather rapidly. Because if you're not seeking to break away from the culture of the whites in their offspring, the way of life that you govern every aspect, every moment of your life by, if you're embracing a culture of disorder, trying to blacken up disorder by making Christianity black, or making Islam black, or making Moorishism black or not black, trying to make it white, or trying to say this is our culture, or we're Asiatics, or we're Moors, and that kind of stupidity, or if you're trying to promote an amorphous nationalism with no cultural grounding, or believing you don't need to have a cultural grounding, or promoting atheism or some other nonsense, blackening up white philosophies, what you're doing is perpetuating disorder. So when you take disorder into any situation, whether you move to an independent piece of land, as soon as you bring a culture of disorder, whether it's blackened up or not, that will sow the seeds of disorder within the population, and it will rapidly deteriorate. But we didn't even get to that point. If we had gotten to that point, that's what would have happened. We saw a snapshot of that with regard to resettlement and repatriation in Liberia. We had a nation established, the whites in our offspring established a colony. They did the same thing in Sierra Leone. Eventually it becomes an independent nation. Our people leaving here, the late 1800s and so forth, so-called 1800s, migrated to the continent to do something for themselves, receiving assistance from the whites in their offspring to prop up this burgeoning nation and so forth. But of course, what takes place? We have the same mindset, that white mindset, trying to bring Christianity, even though we blackened it up. We're going to try to bring Christianity and white culture into Liberia and begin to try to impose that upon the native people of the area, trying to impose white culture and blackface on the native people of the area. So you create a division because you're coming with white culture, self-destructive culture and blackface, and trying to force that on people who don't want anything to do with that kind of culture. The seeds of dissension were sown. Those seeds of dissension still exist today, 100 years later. We saw a snapshot of it. So even if the Garvey movement or some other movements have been successful and had carved out a piece of territory on the continent, and black people moving over there who were Christians and Muslims and so forth, but they were nationalists at the same time, it would have disintegrated rather rapidly. Our people didn't understand that because they had a blind spot. We must recall that people who started these different movements and continued these movements up until today, and people just getting involved in culture and so forth, many of these individuals in their early 20s and became very popular. Garvey was in his 20s when he became very popular worldwide. Other individuals were in their 20s and 30s and didn't have proper information. So they were moving based on what they knew. So you can't fault them for not having information, but we must be intelligent enough and mature enough to recognize that when people didn't have proper information, you don't perpetuate a program or a philosophy that's rooted in misunderstanding from the beginning just because you have some sentimental attachment to a movement. We must be sure. So we say integration and the integration is on the two sides of the coin. One didn't achieve their objectives. The Negro integration still haven't achieved their objectives. They thought they did when they got a Negro mulatto president, and of course he did absolutely nothing but promote dissexuality, homosexuality, and had nothing but contempt for black people and demonstrated that for 8 straight years. So even the Negro integrationists are still having buyer's remorse over the mulatto put forward. But they didn't even achieve their objectives. And of course, the nationalists have not achieved their objectives. achieve their objectives in the mindset that they would have liked to, it would have disintegrated, and people who have proper information can see that vision and see how it would unfold. You can see, no different than you can see what will take place if somebody gorges themselves with alcohol or smokes marijuana and so forth. You know what road they're going down, and you can determine how their body is going to react and how it's going to deteriorate, because you understand the laws that govern biology. And as long as you continue to partake in that, you know what's going to take place. So when you understand culture and the difference between white culture and our ancestral culture, and when people are embracing white culture and blackface and perpetuating disorder, even though they don't understand that they're perpetuating disorder because they have a blind spot, you can see how it's going to unfold even before they do, because they can't see beyond what's in front of them. They don't have that full vision. Two sides of the same coin, objectives were never met. And even if they had been met, it still would have deteriorated. But they didn't even get to that point because they have not been met. We're no closer, once again, to freedom and independence and sovereignty and security in the sovereignty on our independent land. We're no closer to that today than we were 100 years ago. So that's one coin. But then you had another group of individuals who were actually successful. When we were enslaved, what's success if you were enslaved? Freedom from enslavement. Freedom, establishing your own independent nation and defending it. So those who maintain are those who wage warfare against the whites and their offspring, empowered and guided by the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Nsamanfo, the Egungun, the Kuvito, the deities and ancestral spirits of our direct blood circles, giving us the proper direction on the best means by which we wage war against the whites and their offspring, fashioning metal armaments, taking metal armaments from the whites and their offspring, as well as using chemical and biological warfare to wage against the whites and their offspring consistently. So we escaped or freed ourselves. Some escaped, some freed themselves from plantations and so forth. Waged war against established independent sovereign territories right in the United States. During the time of enslavement, they're living free intergenerationally. Dismal Swamp is one of the major popular examples, with thousands of black people living in that area during enslavement intergenerationally. The whites and offspring sent posses and eventually armies, militia, to try to drag those people back in enslavement, and they were met with a formidable army, to the extent that they stopped trying to invade Dismal Swamp with their militias because they knew they couldn't drag the people back into enslavement, so they began to trade with them. So while they're living independently within the quote-unquote Dismal Swamp in Virginia, North Carolina, and so forth, you had other people who are still enslaved on plantations. They had children. When they interviewed the descendants, there were certain children who lived there intergenerationally. They grew up and had never seen a white person before in their lives because their parents and grandparents had freed themselves from enslavement, established an independent territory, grew their own food, procured their own medicine, defended themselves, and so forth. And intergenerationally, they lived and raised their families. And they were always defending themselves, making sure they had a militia in place. That's freedom. Those who forced the end of enslavement because they waged war against the United States government. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people animated by ancestral religion, waging war against the United States Army, killing thousands of their troops, waging war for decades. The United States never drugged them back into enslavement. The Gullah Wars forcing the Civil War to come into existence. And then black people joining into the Civil War, just looking for any kind of excuse or reason to get their hands on a gun to kill as many crackers as they possibly could. Forced the end of enslavement. Rooted in ancestral religion. So the people who actually did something were the people who maintained their ancestral religion. They freed themselves from enslavement and established independent nations like Dismal Swamp, but there were many other smaller ones all over the South and different parts of the Midwest and East Coast United States. And then the Gullah Wars on the major front, forcing the end of enslavement by forcing the Civil War to come into existence and so forth. All these different things happen. So during slavery, the way to success is freedom from enslavement. The only people who would attain that were people who practiced ancestral religion and had a full view of what was going on. And now what constitutes success after that? Is it regular integrationists or nationalists who are still rooted in Eurocentric culture and blackface, trying to perpetuate Christianity or Islam or different white cultures? Those two sides of the same coin, as we have said, didn't make or achieve those goals that they set forward. What about the other people who are descendants of those who are Maroons, descendants of those who practice ancestral religion? They started the independent black towns movement all over the United States, in the South, in the Midwest, East Coast, and going further west. There were hundreds of independent black towns, the ones who maintained their ancestral religion. They had the various 7 principal values of nation building in place. They didn't have a blind spot. They recognized that when they established an independent settlement, they must also have a militia, because the whites in Alice Springs would seek to destroy anything that they built. So those are the kind of black towns who maintained their existence for decades intergenerationally, all the way up into the 20th and so-called 20th and 21st century. You have a few of those towns still existing. But then you had others who separated, so to speak, but they believed, because they were still practicing blackened up versions of white culture or just white culture in general, that if they left the whites in their offspring alone and just did their own thing, then the whites in their offspring would leave them alone. So you have places like Black Wall Street and Rosewood and so forth, communities that were prosperous and becoming prosperous, totally segregated from the whites. They didn't want to bother the whites. They wanted to stay as far away from them as possible, but they did not have that mindset of establishing a military structure simultaneously with establishing an independent territory. They weren't engaged in ancestral religious practice. They didn't have that full view. They had a blind spot. So therefore, they built everything that they needed to build with regard to economics and so forth. But then the whites in our spring come and wage war and destroy and bomb and so forth, and they have no response because they weren't prepared for that. Those who established independent black towns rooted in ancestral religion, they were prepared for that. They were killing Achiwadi for the whites in our spring spirits of disorder, to the extent that the whites in our spring were scared to go and send their militias, because they knew even if they killed a number of people in the town, the majority of the whites who went out there would be killed themselves, and they would not be going back home to their wives and children and families. Like, we'll leave those people alone, because we will be killed if we go out there. They're not just going to take, abuse. We're going to go to the ones who established something and segregated themselves but have no militia. We will attack them. So this is the difference. So we have two sets of Afuraitkaitnit people. People who had a blind spot and people who did not have a blind spot. The people who had the blind spot, like the person driving in the car, they're in a vehicle, they have drive, they have motivation, they have power, they have a destination, but they have a blind spot, and when they make change lanes and make different decisions in the vehicle and not making it to the destination that they desire to make it to, because they can't understand what's going on. They have a blind spot. This Heru Khenty or Khenty on Arty, without his two eyes. So he can't see in the darkness. He can't see the proper way or the proper navigational pathways to get to the destination, even though you're in darkness, even though something else is in control that you can't see. But if you can navigate your way through the darkness, you can make it to your destination and with all of your people and get everything done. How do you overcome that blind spot? We follow the cosmology and you overcome the blind spot. How do we overcome the blind spot now? You have nationalists right now, amorphous nationalists, not rooted in any form of culture at all. They're just a nationalist and just want a quote-unquote nation, but they have no grounding. You have quote-unquote black nationalists, atheists, humanists, socialists, all this other nonsense, but they have a blind spot. They have drive, they have motivation. Some of them are establishing healing centers to deal with natural medicine to a certain extent, or just quote-unquote conventional medicine to heal people, or have drug addiction programs and so forth to help people overcome addictions. Some people have schools. Some people have started businesses, whether it's cleaning businesses or real estate businesses or different things, and they're talking about investing and things like that. They have drive. They have motivation. They have a distant destination, but they're frustrated at the same time because we've been doing this for years. We've had industry. We had historically black colleges and universities pumping out students who are, in all fields of endeavor and so forth, but we're not anywhere close to a nation. Where is the blind spot? Why are people doing this kind of work in certain areas? They're doing a great deal of work in certain areas, making a great deal of progress in a specific field. But when it comes to nation building, we're not even close. So what is the blind spot? I can't see what's going on. They have a blind spot. They don't even recognize they have a blind spot. You don't recognize you have a blind spot until you have the crash. You think everything is going fine when you're driving in the car. You have power and speed, and the car's moving fine, and it appears to be advancing towards your destination. But somebody who has some sight or some insight will recognize this person has a blind spot. If they don't change lanes, or if they don't purify or cleanse themselves and get that blind spot taken care of, they're going to have a crash. Somebody's going to cut them off. Somebody's going to get near them, and they're not going to be able to respond properly because they're not going to be able to perceive what's happening. And that's what's been taking place over and over and over again. Every generation, you have young people every day just coming into knowledge of culture and wisdom and truthstory and things like that, and they jump on the same old failed programs and say, we just need to get this together and make this work just like our people did in the past. We need to restart this old movement, and they try to restart old movements. And where is the blind spot? Our cosmology shows you where the blind spot is so you can overcome it. When we go back to our cosmology, we can overcome these issues and resolve them and actually get to our destination. We've proven already that we're not close to a destination that we are seeking to arrive at. So just like someone in your family, you have a number of different family members who have heart disease and diabetes and all these different illnesses and so forth. Everybody's in the same boat. Somebody in the family says, okay, let's look at something. What were we doing before to make sure that we didn't develop all of these different illnesses? Then we start looking at the diets that we have, the fried foods and all these other things. And then we look back at the kind of diets we had 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, primarily a plant-based diet and so forth. And then some people in the family say, we're going to go back to the diet we used to have and stop deep frying and doing all this other nonsense. And then they begin to purify their bodies and become healthy while everybody else in the family is following the new standard American diet, and they're dying at early ages and everything else and suffering all the way to the grave. In the same fashion, we see what people have been doing for over a century. At some point, someone has to say, maybe we need to go back to what worked for our people in the past. Maybe we need to stop trying to follow failed strategies that have never produced any freedom whatsoever. Maybe we need to leave white culture alone, or white culture and blackface alone, and stop rationalizing white culture and trying to make that part of our quote-unquote nationalism. Maybe we need to go back to what actually worked for our people in the past. Maybe we need to go back to the right political diet and purify ourselves and so forth. That's what people do when they seek to remove that blind spot. Our cosmology has already laid it out. Cosmology deals with the nature of the functioning of the forces in nature, in creation, that uphold divine order. Of course, they have shrines within your body, within your physical body. Your organs and systems are shrines for the different divinities. It's an orderly structure. So when we align with the forces in nature through our ancestral religious practices, then we align with divine order. When you align with divine order, you can easily perceive what disorder is and how to eradicate it. But if you don't seek to align with divine order by invoking the divinities who are connected to your blood circle, then you don't understand when you're in disorder, because you think you're in disorder so long that you think that is normal. When a blind spot manifests, you don't even recognize it as a blind spot. You think that you're all right. You think that everything is fine. Just like somebody smoking and drinking and so forth, they think that labored breathing and so forth, when they're walking upstairs or running, they think that's just a normal thing of just, getting old. They don't realize that their lungs are suffering. They don't realize that there are cancerous cells developing within them that within a few years will turn into tumors and so forth, and people die, don't even realize that the cancer was developing for years. They go to the doctor because they feel some pains and so forth, then it is spread all throughout the body. They didn't realize that they were in disorder because they were in disorder so long that they thought it was normal. The same thing goes for here. So our cosmology, we can always go back to our cosmology. When Heru became, quote unquote, blinded, or his two eyes became missing, Heru comes, she heals those two eyes and so forth so he can see. Tahuti comes and brings that divine light. So here's the key. Invocation of the divinity of divine wisdom. Oracular divination. Going through the gateway of the spirit realm so you can communicate with your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, spiritually cultivated, and the deities, the forces of nature that govern creation, of course, govern your own consciousness, as well as your patriclan and matriclans and so forth. You align with the forces in nature that govern you. You're aligning with order. When you align with order, then disorder is repulsive to you. And when disorder shows up, you can sense it immediately. And you only seek to repel it, reject it, eradicate it. So you align with the force of divine wisdom to make proper decisions. But even before you get to that oracular portion, the first thing that happens is the invocation of Heru. She shows up. Heru shows up to heal the eyes, and then once Heru's physical eyes can operate, he can see again, then he needs that from Tahuti. Heru governs, as we said, she's Oshun in the Yoruba tradition, and AFAHYE or Afu in the Akhan tradition, governing that sensual attraction that is the precursor to sexual activity and the replenishment of its harmony. That's what the nature of pleasure is, the replenishment of harmony of divine order. She's the one that draws together, the sensual attraction draws together the sperm and ovum, draws together the male and female, draws together the sperm and ovum, pulls together that DNA from the mother and the father, pulls together disparate elements that are designed to be brought together in a harmonious fashion. Her energy, that central attraction, draws the male and female, two halves of a whole, complementary opposites, draws them together to fuse together in a harmonious way. Then the sperm and ovum are fused together, drawn together by her energy in a harmonious way. And then they can produce a harmonious entity, which is a child. That same energy draws together different colors in a harmonious fashion that creates a painting. That same energy draws together different notes in a harmonious fashion to produce music, draws together different elements for clothing, the aesthetic or the beauty of music, sound, art, innovation, creativity, technology, the kind of innovative technology, creativity, and so forth, reproduction. She has the capacity to pull things together to create new innovative things and new manifestations of harmony and so forth. When they say she's the goddess of beauty, beauty is really harmony. Harmony is talking about divine order. Harmony is a revelation of divine order. So when you're talking about beauty or something that's aesthetic, the whites and offspring are just talking about something aesthetic. When we talk about beauty, we're talking about Heru. We're talking about the force in creation that can pull things together in a harmonious fashion. When something is harmonious, then it manifests or exudes, quote unquote, order, which beauty is It's a revelation of order. Harmony is the foundation of beauty. If something is discordant or disordered, like if you have people playing music or singing or something like that, and the chords are discordant, then it creates discordant energy, perverse energy, disturbing energy, and so forth, and it's discordant to the spirit of the people who are listening to it. But if it's harmonious, that simply means that it's a revelation of order. And therefore, you can call it beautiful because it's a revelation of order. It's a manifestation of harmony, which is a revelation of divine order. The same thing is true of a painting. The same thing is true of invention or innovation and so forth. The same thing is true of the Afurakani male, Afuraitkaitnit female coming together, being drawn together in a harmonious fashion. And of course, it's only Afurakani males and Afuraitkaitnit females. There's no sexuality, homosexuality that's insane and perverse, idiotic, degenerate, disordered. And of course, there's no interracialism that is degenerate and disordered and perverse and out of harmony with divine order. And that includes white Hispanics, white Europeans, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Asians, white Hindus, white Latinos, and all that other nonsense. But when she pulls together disparate elements in a harmonious fashion, what she's doing is regulating order, administering order. That's Heru, just like Heru regulates order by regulating the flow of energy in the body and within creation. Heru is regulating order as well. That's why you'll see Heru and Heru as husband and wife. Shango and Oshun and so forth, Yao and Afi and so forth in the different traditions. Now, when she heals the eyes, then he can see. Heru, she's the one who allows him to see order, allows him to see quote unquote beauty, which is see harmony, which is the revelation of order. So he begins to heal. His blind spot begins to heal because he can see the manifestation of order now. He was blind for a minute. He was knocked down on the ground on the mountain. He couldn't see anything. Heru comes along and restores that sight, and the beauty of creation he's able to partake in once again. When we apprehend things visually, the shapes, the colors, geometric forms, those things stimulate us, stimulate our bodies and so forth. The energy being projected, emanating from certain colors, shapes, geometric forms, and colors, move through space and stimulate our eyes. Of course, there's such thing as color therapy and things like that. That's derived from the color that the deities generate when they move through space based on their energy complex, and they generate certain colors and so forth, and these are the colors sacred to the deities. When we invoke these divinities or put on the colors of their sacred colors and so forth, we're aligning our energy with theirs. We change our energetic vibrations, our aura to a certain extent so we can align with their energy and pull it in easier and align with them and so forth. But we perceive things that stimulates our physical body, it stimulates our spirit. Here's where you begin to heal the blind spots. Because the white Sonara Spring will try to tell you that culture is unimportant. We need to focus on economics. We need to focus on this, focus on that. Culture is foundational. Amamre, or culture, is the ways of the nation. That's talking about divine order, how you live your life, your way of life, every moment of every day. We said our culture is the divine acceptance, the law of order, the love of order, the divine rejection, the divine hate. That's culture. So if you say culture is not important, we need to just focus on economics. What you're saying is we don't need to accept divine law and order and reject disorder. Rejecting disorder, your immune and lymphatic systems reject disorder. That's part of the culture of your body. Your circulatory system and respiratory system drawing the nutrients from the air and the foods and everything else and circulate them throughout your body. Your immune and lymphatic systems destroy those toxins and so forth to reject disorder. You incorporate and then you expel toxins. Incorporate what you need and eradicate or eliminate what you don't need. That's culture. The same thing is true politically, economically, and everything else. If someone tells you culture is not important or that's just something you do on weekends like that, Sonara Spring saying, I need to get some culture, I'm going to the symphony. I need to get some culture, we're going to go see a Shakespearean play. I need to get some culture, we're going to go to a concert. that's what the whites and their offspring call culture. Or they're going to eat certain foods that their family eats and so forth. That's not culture in the real sense. For us, culture has to do with the deities who operate through creation. The way they move through creation, their way of functioning is their way of life. That's culture. We are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. When we align with the forces of nature that govern us, we're involved in culture. When we invoke them and our systems to heal ourselves and strengthen ourselves, we're engaged in ancestral religion and so forth. When the whites and our offspring tell us that culture is not important and then we repeat that nonsense, that's what creates the blind spot. And then we begin to rationalize foolishness and stupidity because we have a blind spot. We are in a vehicle, we think we have power, but we keep crashing because we have a blind spot, but then we can't see the problem. When Heru comes along, what happens on a practical level? When you first begin to learn something about yourself, the first thing that happens, when you first learn about Black people started civilizations and you get this information and you realize that you've been lied to all of your life, and Black people around the world have been lied to for centuries. That's an explosion that goes off in your head, of course, in your spirit. You want to operationalize that so you can get back in harmony with order, because if you get yourself back in harmony with order, then you can connect with others, help them to get back in harmony with order. And part of harmonizing with order is establishing an Amanne, a nation, because a nation is governed by AMANSEM. We're children of that nation. We're cells within that organizational structure, that organ entity. And when you get in harmony with the deity that governs you, you also get in harmony with the deity that governs your parent organ, which is your parent divinity. You get in harmony with the Supreme Being. So nationism is rooted in ancestral religion. There's no separation between nation building and ancestral religion. When you find out what deity governs you, that's ancestral religion. What deity governs the nation that you're a natural part of, that's part of ancestral religion. So when you first begin to find out that you've been lied to and you want to start operationalizing that knowledge, instinctively you have that desire, then you're ready to do something. When you're focused, the first thing that happens is Heru shows up, because your eyes were blinded by the whites and their offspring, but then Heru immediately. When you get up every morning, what's the first thing that you do? When you cleanse yourself, you go look in the mirror. Previously, you were told that Black is inferior, Black hair is inferior, Black features are inferior, everything about you is inferior. You yourself, as a human being, Afurakani is inferior, and of course your culture, your way of life, your people, and everything else, but it starts with Black people based on their Black skin is inferior. That's what you've been taught. So Heru immediately dispossesses you of that foolish notion. So as soon as you begin to look in the mirror, you look at yourself every day from that point on. When you first learn this information, you see yourself and you see every other Afuraitkaitnit person, a reflection of yourself. Then you begin to recognize order. You recognize the quote-unquote beauty of yourself because you're recognizing harmony. You're recognizing a melanin-dominant entity with natural features, of course, natural hair and so forth. That's a revelation of divine order. We're the only created entities, the original people and so forth. So, Heru shows you the beauty of yourself. Immediately you begin to appreciate, meaning recognize the reality of order within your own skin, your own hair and so forth. So you embrace that. That's the first piece. She's showing you that. She's showing and giving you insight. She's removing that blind spot from you. So you never again will pervert your hair to make it look like one of the whites in our offspring. You won't rationalize straightening out your hair, whether it's with a curling iron, flat iron, blow drying, or whatever, making foolish excuses like, oh, we're versatile, and some of us, we can straighten our hair one day, we're natural the other day, and twisted one day, and we have all styles because we're just a diverse people. You won't repeat that kind of stupidity, which comes from the whites and their offspring, because deep down inside, you're still trying to hold on to some excuse to get back to that straight hair. So when people talk that nonsense, that's what's really happening. That blind spot is still there. But when you remove the blind spot, those kind of foolish rationalizations are no longer existent. That's for the female, and for the male, they're no longer existent either. Because the male who is blind will pretend like they appreciate natural and say that's nice, but deep down inside, they're still lusting after the straight hair and so forth. And when the woman switches up one day, they're relieved that she finally switched up. And they may rationalize like, oh, it doesn't matter. You can switch up every now and then. You're just being creative. Deep down inside, the Negro is still secretly wishing for the straight hair, the light skin, the straight nose, and all that other nonsense. But when you remove the blinders, you don't rationalize stupidity. You don't make excuses for that nonsense, because you actually can now. Heru, the one who governs beauty, harmony, the revelation of divine order, is present. She put the milk in your eyes. You can see now. You can see the beauty. You can see the revelation of order, and that's all you want to maintain. You want to incorporate order and restore order consistently. So the first thing you see every day is you're seeing yourself, and you seek to preserve that order, manifest as harmony and beauty. You seek to preserve that every moment of every day, so you no longer pollute your hair or your eyes or your skin or any male or female. And if you're a male, you don't seek to encourage sisters to pervert their hair, eyes, or anything else, and putting pressure on them to engage that, because you're no longer a Negro. So you seek to preserve that which Het Heru has shown you that you have embraced, because you feel out of order and disordered if you seek to alter it in any way. Because when you become awakened to reality and snap out of that coma, any alteration of what is natural for you is repulsive. Just like two magnets repelling one another on the table. If someone even suggests that you blow dry your hair, straighten it out, or lighten up the skin, or put in color contacts, or try to find a sister who has color contacts, or look for a sister who is straightening out her hair, putting in a weave, and trying to look like a stripper and all this other nonsense, it's repulsive. Instinctively, it's repulsive, because you're back in harmony with order now. You can't rationalize foolishness when you're in harmony with order. So that's the first thing. Externally, you see the beauty manifestation. Internally, you begin to value the fact that every organ and system in your body is a different divinities within your body. So you don't want to defile or desecrate the shrines of the Abosom within your body. You don't want to desecrate your body, which is a shrine for your own Kra and a shrine for your own Ba, divine living energy. So you want to maintain the beauty of yourself internally. So you don't seek to continue to pollute yourself. You don't make excuses, idiotic excuses about smoking weed or drinking alcohol or doing other drugs and so forth. Gluttony, you don't make excuses for that, because you're living in harmony with order. She's allowed you to see beauty, which is harmony, a manifestation of order, a revelation of order. Once you see that and align with it, then anything beyond that is repulsive, instinctively. Just to think about engaging and putting something in your system that should not be in your system is repulsive. So that's internally. Internally and externally, you're manifesting the beauty of Het Heru, because she's healing the eyes and removing the blind spot. You don't seek to put your body in situations. Talk about what you put inside your body, and then externally, but you don't seek to put yourself or your body in situations that are disordered. You don't seek to engage and interact with individuals who are engaged in criminality. You don't seek to engage in promiscuity or anything that would defile your own quote-unquote beauty or harmony that Het Heru has shown you when she removed the blindness. Those are the first things that happen automatically. That's the first thing that manifests. You get up every day, you look in the mirror every day. It's a constant reminder, and Het Heru is reminding you every moment of every day. Every time you pass by a mirror or communicate with somebody, or look at your hand when you're reaching for a phone or whatever it is, you're constantly reminded of the order of creation. She's constantly making you see that. And you seek to And when you purify yourself, you seek to perpetuate that purification process on a daily basis for the rest of your life. And when you engage that kind of purification on a regular basis, then you influence others as well. Externally, that's internally, that's behaviorally. You don't seek to engage in foul behavior and so forth. That's the first thing that takes place when the blind spot is removed. The next thing that takes place, there's one thing visually, but then orally, talking about A-U-R-A-L, to hear, when you identify people, you may see yourself on a regular basis, but the thing that you hear on a regular basis more than anything else is your name. When you are identified or you identify yourself by a specific collection of sound vibrations, it's like food. If you eat certain foods that shouldn't be in your body, then they create disorder within your body. And they affect your emotions, they affect your mental output and so forth. If you seek to identify with a collection of sound vibrations that are not in harmony with who you actually are, but are actually discordant to who you are, and you try to receive and accept those and identify with them, then what you're swallowing is a unit of energy or a collection of energy that's discordant within your system. It's disruptive within you. It creates disruptions within your emotional and mental output. So when you try to identify by English name or identify with the Arab name or Hindu name or an Asian name or any kind of label that's not Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, we know the sound vibrations you can sing and break a glass with the sound vibrations. You know when a car is driving by and the sound vibrations are high, they can cause the glass in your home. Sound has power to destroy. It can also create healing effects. What are the sound vibrations in Eurocentric names and Arab names and all these other names? What is that collection doing once it enters your eardrums and stimulates you and oscillates the vestibular system within you? What happens in the inner ear? How does that affect you? What discarnate white spirits are connected to these names that were part of their blood into the families and so forth and tortured our people who are hanging around? They're magnets for these discarnate spirits. So what happens is you have people listening to the whites and their offspring saying, oh, well, culture is not important. Well, names are just semantics. That's just a label. If you don't have a repulsion for English names or Arabic names, or which simply means a repulsion for discordant vibrations, then you seek to swallow or consume discordant vibrations. You seek to, it's like radiation, waves that are harmonious, certain kinds of music that's harmonious, that stimulates your body in a harmonious way. Or you can have food that's irradiated, radiation. You can go somewhere where there's radiation that creates cancer within the body, radiation. So you can have sound vibrations that are harmonious, that are stimulative in a positive capacity, or you can have sound vibrations that are disharmonious, and you keep trying to ingest them and identify with them by ingesting them and holding on to them and utilizing them as your identity. And it creates a disturbance within your spirit body, but it also creates a disturbance within your emotions, your output, and your capacity to process information. One of the reasons why people constantly rationalize stupidity is because they're identifying with discordant vibrations, and you hear your name more than any other formula or collection of sound vibrations anywhere. For example, every time you get up in the morning, you see yourself on a consistent basis. And throughout the course of the day, going to the bathroom, going to see in a mirror and so forth, you're constantly getting a glimpse of yourself. When people call your name, when you speak your name, when you contemplate your name and so forth, that's a sound vibration that's entering into your system. That sound set of sound vibrations is energetic, and either if it's a properly given name or received name, it stimulates your spirit to align with your ka, your divine consciousness and your divine function in creation. That's what a name is for. Those sound vibrations stimulate your spirit because your spirit is structured according to that. The sound vibrations emanating from you is different from the sound vibrations emanating from somebody else. It's like every instrument in a band is shaped in a different way, so you can take your same set of lungs and blow into each instrument, but because they're structured differently, the sounds that emanate are different. The life force energy is moving through your physical body. That specific structure is unique. Nobody else has that structure. Nobody else has that specific clan structure, as well as your specific DNA, and unless you have an identical twin. So the life force energy circulating through your vehicle puts forward a specific configuration of sound vibrations that's different than anybody else's, that's unique to you. When you replicate that configuration, you're speaking your true name. If you receive a group of sound vibrations that are discordant and at odds with what's emanating from you every moment of every day, then you're creating a disturbance within your energy field, a disturbance within your emotional output, with your mind, your spirit. So therefore, the kind of people who rationalize disorder are the people who are constantly ingesting disordered vibrations on a regular basis by identifying with the collection of sound vibrations that have nothing to do with them. It's like eating foods that have nothing to do with your body, like constantly taking in crack cocaine and so forth. You're getting some surge of energy, but it's actually destroying you every moment that is inside your system. So you'll notice that people who have English names, Arabic names, and so forth, there are certain things that they're doing, but then there's a blind spot. And they don't even realize the blind spot is there. So they begin to rationalize disorder and defend disorder. They're ready to fight you over disorder. It's no different than somebody trying to straighten out their hair. They may be doing something with regard to, selling herbs to heal people with certain illnesses or fibroids and things like that, but then they turn around and rationalize disorder. I say, no, there's nothing wrong with wearing a perm every now and then. So they're poisoning their body by putting those chemicals in their body. They're perpetuating ignorance. They're disrupting the natural curl pattern that's an antenna anyway. But they're rationalizing disorder because they have a blind spot. And they're perpetuating ignorance and disorder, self-destructive behavior. So people rationalizing disorder. As long as you rationalize disorder, you maintain the disorder. And that disordered energy within you allows you to make bad decisions in certain areas. You can make good decisions in one area and bad decisions in the other area. You can eat well in certain areas, but then you smoke weed and eventually you develop lung cancer. It doesn't matter how well you were eating all this other time. Now, before we go forward, there's 90 seconds left in the broadcast. Phone line, or online if you want to listen on the phone line. After it cuts off in a minute, you have to get on the phone line. The number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about a minute to call in. And we're not going to go too much further into overtime. But for those who can't stay on, one of the things that we have been promoting is our documentary film. We have a crowdfunding campaign for that. When you look on our ADEBISA, African American Ancestral Divination documentary film project, you will see the 8-minute and 56-second trailer, 9-minute trailer. Check out the trailer. If you appreciate the work that we're doing, we're trying to get to at least 20% of the fundraiser so we can begin filming next month, February, which is coming very quickly. So check that trailer out. If you like the trailer, you like to contribute, receive some books in return for your contribution if you like. So please go to our page on Facebook to see that information. So, as we were saying with regard to the name, the Edin, the name, those sound vibrations are units of energy that stimulate you to align your spirit with your Ka on a consistent basis. When you hear your name, contemplate it. That's something you hear more than anything else. You're constantly realigning yourself with order every time you contemplate that name or hear it or speak it. But if you're constantly identifying with a set of vibrations that are discordant, it creates discordance within your thought patterns, and somewhere you begin to rationalize disorder. You rationalize it with the name, but then you begin to transfer that rationalizing of disorder to different areas of life. And of course, the whites in our spring understand that, so this is why they removed our names and named us after them in the first place, because they know how disruptive it is to our spirits. But when you first get involved in culture and you're focused, Heru not only shows you the internal beauty, external beauty, behavioral manifestation of harmony with regard to your body and where it should be placed and so forth, what you put in your body and how you present yourself and so forth. But then the next thing is not only what you see on a regular basis, but what you hear and incorporate on a regular basis. And the first thing that you hear and the thing that you hear most and incorporate most consistently throughout the course of your life is your name. And it's to align with your Kai, your divine function, every moment of every day. So that's the next thing that automatically changes. But then the next piece, of course, is the only way you can transform that name is by being engaged in ancestral religion. So the next move that Heru takes you to is the beauty or manifestation of harmony, the revelation of order, which is ancestral religion. And you become embracing of ancestral religion because your function as a cell within the great divine body is an ancestral religious function. We are children of nature that are the embodiments of divine order and creation. You can't separate from ancestral religion in reality, even if you really wanted to. You can be neglectful, but you can't separate yourself from the created universe if you're an Afuraitkaitnit person with a Ka or a Ka'et. Now, the whites and offspring are cancerous cells within the great divine body, so they're separate from the other cells. Just like the cancer cells that develop in your body are isolated and destroyed because they're not part of the natural order. So they are deserving of destruction, and that's what happens. That's what the whites and offspring are. White Asians, white Europeans, white Hispanics, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Europeans, Americans, Hindus, Arabs, and so forth. But we have those divine organs of the Supreme Being, so we are part of that ancestral religious structure, whether you wanted to engage it or not. So if you're neglectful of that, then just being engaged in self-destructive activity. But when you're awakened and Heru opens your eyes and removes the blind spot, you recognize you need to embrace your ancestral name, and any Eurocentric name is repulsive. You don't even have to rationalize it. Those sound vibrations are repulsive. You're not able to continue to identify that Eurocentric name unless you have a blind spot. If you have a blind spot, if a car is coming up on your side, you're going to change lanes immediately and run right into the car because you don't see anything coming. You don't see a problem because you have a blind spot. Heru Khenty and Arty. The two eyes are gone. So you don't have a problem changing lanes and you just run right into somebody because you can't see it. But when the blind spot is removed, as soon as you hear that Eurocentric name, it's repulsive. You're not able to continue to allow yourself to receive disordered energy, just like somebody, once they recognize that crack cocaine or alcohol and everything else is destructive, it's repulsive. The smell of it is repulsive. To see it is repulsive. They cannot put it in their bodies any longer. They will not disrupt the natural order of their bodies any longer. So you recognize you need to repel that. You need to have a formula that every time it's spoken or contemplated, it realigns your spirit with your cry or your soul, your divine consciousness. So you seek to find out what that name is, because that's something you're going to be using every day. That takes you right into ancestral, takes you right into oracular divination, takes you right into Tahuti and Seshat. And this is where Tahuti comes in and begins to restore the light or the eye of Heru with regard to wisdom and illumination, so he can navigate his way through the darkness and make good decisions so he can reestablish himself on the throne. So Heru takes you through that process to recognize beauty of culture, beauty of who you are, harmony with divine order, a revelation of order, who you are physically, internally, externally, behaviorally, culturally, and so forth, spiritually, and then you're led into that wisdom aspect where you see illumination, you begin to engage in oracular divination, invoking Tahuti, engaging that process so you can begin to incorporate thoughts, intentions, and actions that are harmonious and place you firmly, in your culture. When you're grounded and rooted in the culture, and the culture, as we said, is the divine law or love of order, the divine acceptance of order, the divine rejection or hatred of disorder. You seek to align every thought, every intention, and every action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our culture. It's like the cells in your body and the organs, they seek to execute their functions every moment of every day in harmony with order. Unless something goes wrong, and then they seek to recalibrate. That's our culture. In order to execute your function in creation and align every thought, intention, and action with divine order, you need to know what that function is. So that natural inclination you have to engage in activities on a daily basis that are in harmony with the function you came into the world to execute, you learn that through invoking Tahuti and Seshat, getting that illumination of who you are, what your function in creation is, why did you incarnate into the world, how to execute that function, what spiritual capacities you have from your patriclan and matriclan divinities to carry that function out, and how to utilize that energy. All of that is taking place when you embrace ancestral religion. It all comes into you when you embrace ancestral religion. And now you can fully function physically and spiritually as who you are. And when you function as who you are, you no longer have the blind spots. And therefore, you have a natural inclination. Knowing what your function is, you function as a cell with your own needs with regard to nutrients and so forth, but cells also function interdependently with other cells within that organ. And that organ is an entity that they're all subordinate to, but they work interdependently with regard to one another, meaning they are nationists. Not nationalists, but nationists. They work interdependently. They serve their own needs, but then they recognize their needs are connected with the needs of the other cells within that same organ or nation. So when they know who they are and what their functions are, and they don't have a blind spot, and therefore they don't rationalize disorder, then they begin to work together with other cells interdependently, executing every function that they need. This is nationism, and it's the same with us. You have a natural inclination, a propensity to work in harmony with other Afuraitkaitnit people of your clan, as well as of your Amanne, of your nation. And we talked about a locative identity, that nation, that natural coalescing, blending of blood circles in a specific region of the Earth Mother. We have a natural inclination to function in this specific organ that we are a part of. That's part of nation building, but we're talking about nationism. So when you act on that natural inclination, then you naturally settle into one or more of the 7 principal values of nation building, or AMANSEM, that governs us. Food production and preservation, methods of curing disease, establishing a military structure, establishing educational institutions, training institutions, cultural institutions, religious institutions, institution building. That 5th principal value, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence. That 6th principal value, the building of homes on acquired land. That 7th principal value, manufacturing of clothing and so forth. So these 7 principal values, AMANSEM, nation building or restoration. You're naturally inclined to begin to engage one another, Afuraitkaitnit people, us together, and you naturally settle into one of those 7 or more of those 7 principal values of nation building based on the deity that governs your head and what your natural capacities are, the energy complex that you have. Some people are naturally children of fighting divinities and the immune system, lymphatic system divinities. So they're naturally inclined towards establishing a military structure. Some people are natural healers and healeresses, so they're naturally inclined towards that phase of aspect of nation building, establishing systems of curing disease. Some people are children of agricultural deities, so they're naturally inclined towards dealing with food production and food preservation. Some people are children of Heru and so forth, and they're naturally inclined towards regulating order within the Amanne, the nation, relentlessly challenging disorder, establishing governmental structures, mitigating disputes and so forth, so people don't kill each other over, basic things or complex things. Some people are naturally inclined towards manufacturing or engineering and so forth, children of Obwade or Ptah and other divinities who deal with that. Some people are naturally connected to Tait, the divinity that deals with weaving and so forth, so they're naturally inclined towards textiles and clothing and things like that. Some people, of course, children of Heru, dealing with creativity and innovation, reproduction, all these different things. It's rooted in our ancestral religion. Informs our nationism. It's rooted, it's a component part of our nationism. You have ancestral religion, culture, nation building, all comprises nationism or Amanne. And of course, as we said, nationism is the purification of nationalism. But the way you remove that blind spot is following the culture, following the cosmology. What took place first to heal Heru and return his eyesight. First returning those physical eyes and then that insight. First the physical sight and then the insight. Heru coming to heal, remove blinders and so forth, to Khenty coming to heal as well and giving that insight. That's how we overcome the blind spot. These are the blind spots that nationalists have not been able to see. So they've been floating around in amorphous nationalism, as we said, or secular nationalism or secular Pan-Africanism and so forth. And of course, it has not yielded any of the results that we've been looking for. And it will not, because it was established by people who were misinformed from the beginning. Now, we don't focus on the fact that they were misinformed. We focus on the fact that we're mature enough to recognize that when these individuals, many of the people who are praised, they were in their 20s and 30s and so forth when they started out, some people even younger than that. Of course, they were misinformed 100 years ago or 50 years ago and so forth because they were part of that group, as we talked about earlier. Some people were integrationists, some people were quote-unquote nationalists, two sides of the same coin, but then are people who were the ones who are actually revolutionaries who established independent maroon nations and were successful. We need to follow their example. We don't follow the failed examples. We follow the examples of people who actually did what we're trying to do and were successful at it. It's rooted in ancestral religious practice, which informs your nationism, shows you what your place in creation is, what your place in the nation is, and how to fully manifest that. So that's how we, number one, identify the fact that people have a blind spot, remove the blind spots. And when you remove the blind spot, you're actually removing nationalism in and of itself, and it's being replaced with Amanne, with nationism. So we go into detail about nationism in our book, Odwiraman, AFAHYE, talking about Amanne, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black nationism, the purification of nationalism. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can hit the number 1. We only have a few minutes left on the broadcast. I'm going to go in the chat room real quick. Okay, just make sure we did not miss anything. Okay, one question was talking about the Aten and the Ya, or the Yo, which is the sun and the moon. So Aten is a deity, Atenit is a deity, male and female deities, Ya and Ya'at, are male and female moon divinities. These are our deities. But then Ra and Ra'at will possess the Aten and utilize Aten for specific purposes, just like to have Al-Sar and Al-Set possess the moon as well, so they become Al-Sar Ya, or Al-Sar operating through the moon. Just like Al-Sar can possess your body, and when he possesses you and so forth, or Batala possesses, or Wusi possesses somebody, he's operating within that vehicle to communicate to the people. If you're in a car, somebody else gets in the car and you get in the back seat. Now they're controlling the vehicle at that moment, but you're both in the vehicle, but they're in the driver's seat. And at some point you get back in the driver's seat and they leave the vehicle. That's how possession is. In the same fashion, Ra and Ra'at can possess the sun and utilize that sun as a transmitter of their energy. But the sun in and of itself is a divinity. The male and female forces that animate the sun, Aten and Atenit. And the same thing with Ya and Ya'at. And Khenty, sometimes spelled Konsu, but Khensu. He is a divinity as well. We did a whole broadcast on him. And then Khensit or Khensuit. They're Ayensu and Ayensua in Akan. We did a broadcast on them. You'll see that in one of our archives. All right. Just want to make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room real quick. Okay, so that was the last piece there. So we just wanted to go through that information. Of course, this is going to be part of an upcoming publication dealing with Khenty and Arty, Heru, the foremost one without eyes, as well as Khenty, Arty, Heru, the foremost one of the two eyes, and so forth. We'll talk about those different phases of Heru in those different phases and so forth. But this is the key. This is the missing piece with regard to the stagnation of nationalism, Pan-African nationalism, various iterations of nationalism. This is why we have returned to Amanne, returned to nationism. It's an ancestral mandate to return to nationism, which is a purification of nationalism. And nationism in and of itself removes the to nationalism. So when people don't understand what culture Amamre really is, because they've been infected by the whites in their offspring, they will find themselves stagnating for years, decades, over a century in a stagnant nationalism. This is what's been taking place. It takes maturity and just sankofa, returning and going and grasping from our ancestral past to make sure we bring order to the present. It takes that kind of maturity to recognize what has been taking place historically, the spiritual foundation for that, the cosmological foundation for that, and how to overcome, expose and overcome these blind spots, or this blind spot, this major blind spot, and then move forward harmoniously. So we're following the path of those who were successful. During slavery, the ones who were successful are the ones who freed our people from enslavement in their lifetime and defended their sovereign territories generationally against the whites and their offspring, and raised generations of children and defended their territory. Those people did that during that time. They were successful. They forced the end of enslavement, and then we have post, quote unquote, enslavement. Some of our people moved towards integration, as we said earlier, some towards an amorphous nationalism, as we said earlier, never met that objective. But then you had the other people who were descendants of those who freed themselves, who established independent black towns all over the country. The ones who made ancestral religion, those are the ones who maintained those towns for decades, rooted in their culture, and they defended them militarily. Then you had other people, some even established some black towns as well, but they built churches and everything else, and were bringing white people into the towns and having sex with white people and everything else, and all kinds of nonsense, and they ended up becoming destroyed. Infiltrated, some of them being infiltrated by the whites in their offspring, some of them simply being destroyed by the whites in their offspring, some of them being destroyed simply by the whites in their offspring seeing them becoming prosperous. Then they allow some black people to come shop in their areas downtown, some little forms of integration, and then our people simply abandon those little black towns that they were part of because they wanted to partake and move into the neighborhoods of the whites and their offspring. Meaning that all along they had that blind spot, that infection, while they were building and maintaining their own town. They weren't building it because they were engaged in nationism. They were building it because the whites and offspring wouldn't allow them to commiserate with them. But as soon as they gave them a bit of daylight, they abandoned what they were building because they really weren't building. But those who were successful, those who maintained ancestral religion, who were engaged in etchi-sign ancestral religious reversion, those are the people who were successful throughout. We're following those examples because they're successful. They were successful and continue to be so. We are descendants of those people. some of our people are reincarnations of those people. So that's the direction we're following. That is Amanne, that is Nationism, that is the purification of nationalism, and that's the path we should have been on and remained on, but this is the path that we are returning to. So we only have a few minutes left in the broadcast, so we just want to say Yedase for tuning in. Again, we have our crowdfunding campaign for our film, documentary film, AMARUKAFO, ADEBISA, ADWUMADI, African American Ancestral Divination Project. We plan to begin filming in February, going to the different cities where our healers are and showing their methods of ancestral divination maintained in the Akhan tradition, which is hoodoo, the Yoruba tradition, which is juju in North America, the voodoo tradition, which is the Ewe and Bone tradition in North America, the Wanga tradition, which is Ovambo in North America, the Ngengan tradition, which is Fang in North America. We maintain these ancestral religious traditions for hundreds of years here. We're not dependent on anybody outside of our blood circles for our ancestral religion. We're not dependent on anybody to go travel to the continent or travel anywhere else to get initiated and get shrines and so forth. We're not dependent on any of that. We maintain our ancestral religions here. We maintain divinatory practices, oracular divination. We're going to show that. We're going to demonstrate that by interviewing the different individuals, the sisters that we have, that you see in the trailer, that you will see in the trailer, in their places where their shrines are, in their respective cities and so forth. We'll be doing a presentation as well in the film on our divination system and so forth in the hoodoo tradition. So if you'd like to see that content come out and support that work, please contribute. Yedase to those who have contributed. We're at 3% of our goal. We're trying to get to at least 20% of the goal so we can begin the filming in February, because we want to have a release date in June. So we have to film in February and March and part of April, going to the different cities, and then start that editing process. Our goal is to have the film released in June. But we need to start the process. So we're at 3%. It's been out for about a week and a half. When we first released the trailer on not this past Joda Monday, but the previous Joda Monday. So it's been about a week and a half. We have about 3,300 plus views on Facebook right now with regard to the Facebook version of the trailer. So of course we want that to be shared to get out as much as possible. Share the crowdfunding site on fundraiser.com, fundrazr.com/AMARUKAFO_ADEBISA, and please support the effort. So Yedase, we thank you for tuning into the broadcast, and Yebeshiabio. Oh, I'm sorry, before we go, our Echisign Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference is coming up March 12th here in Washington, D.C. It's free, of course, as always, open to our people only. It's from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. We will have different presenters dealing with different aspects of ancestral religion. Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau out of New Orleans will be talking about the voodoo tradition, ancestral voodoo that's been maintained in America for hundreds of years. Before the Haitians migrated, voodoo was brought in the blood circles of our people here the whole time. I'll be talking about the hoodoo tradition, which is the Akan tradition that's been in America for hundreds of years since we first arrived here. We have Mama Mawusi Ashakir, who will be talking about the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition that has been maintained in America for hundreds of years. It has nothing to do with us going anywhere to the Caribbean or the continent to get shrines. It's been here the whole time since we first arrived here. So she'll be dealing with the Juju tradition. We're going to have one more speaker, which we will confirm, but this is March 12th. We have an Echisign page on our website, Echisign page on Facebook. We also have the AMARUKAFO ADEBISA page on Facebook as well. We have a trailer for the Echisign conference as well. You can check that out. If you would like to place your business in our Echisign book, journal, which we will be and also placing on our website, you can check out the website for the different amounts. If you want a 1/4 page, it's $25. Half page is $35. Full page is $50. We still have space, ad space, if you would like to add your business. And of course, as we said earlier, we've had over 3 million hits on our website over the past year, past 12 months. So when we put the journal on the website, we'll offer it as a softcover book for sale, but we will also have the ebook version for free on the website. We get thousands of downloads of our free books. All of our 24 books are free downloads, the ebook versions, and we sell the softcovers, which range from $8 to $11. But if you place your ad in the etchy signed book, the free version will be there. Your ad will be there. So hundreds of thousands of people download the book or see the book and so forth just by going to the website, the free versions. They will see your ad from this point on. So if you would like to place an ad for your business, organization, or institution, just go to the etchy sign page on our website, Facebook or regular website, and it will take you there and show you all of the information. So if you have questions about the conference or the film and so forth, hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, Odwirafo, YouTube, as well as our regular website, and we get with you. So again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning into the broadcast, and Yebesha Abio, we will meet again. Ptah.